Right, well, good morning, everyone, and a warm welcome to UK Research and Innovation's first all-staff conference. Welcome to everyone here in Swindon, but also across our offices, centres and institutes as we broadcast this live. My name is Ian Kenyon. I'm the Chief Finance Officer and Deputy Chief Executive, and I am really looking forward to today. It's our first opportunity to come together as a unified organisation and take a closer look at what brings us together, what are the opportunities and challenges ahead, and importantly, what is our individual and combined contribution and role to making UK research and innovation an outstanding success. So the agenda for today, can you put the agenda up actually? So the agenda for today covers a number of exciting areas. Sorry, do I have to do it, Marky? Okay. The agenda for today, which we'll get the feed in, it covers a number of areas. So we're going to start with a presentation from our Chief Executive, Sir Mark Walport, on the way UKRI will succeed, pushing the frontiers of knowledge and finding ways to put our knowledge to practical use. We'll then have our Deputy Director of Strategy, Dr. Alex Marsh, will take us through some of the key points from our strategic prospectus, and that will help us to deliver increased investment across the UK in research and innovation. I'll then return to talk about the way that Mark's vision and our strategy are underpinned by an essential piece of work to optimise our overall effectiveness through our organisation structure, our systems and our processes. We'll then have time for a panel to answer questions and take comments, followed by a short break. We will have 4 of our executive chairs who will also form part of the Q&A session before, who will host a key part of this conference, celebrating some examples of your work, recognising your contribution to innovation, excellence, integrity and collaboration. We will also look at how you have interpreted our values as part of the UKRI-wide photo competition. Today is the beginning of a two-way dialogue. We have about 750 people here in this conference room in Swindon, and we know hundreds of you are watching on the live stream. It's very important that we hear as much as possible from you, your thoughts and ideas, wherever you are. And we're using an audience interaction tool today called Slido to help us gather your thoughts and questions. So in good question time fashion, here is how it works. To access Slido, which is sli.do, open your browser on your phone or laptop and type in the code. Again, there's a slide, I think, for this. You enter hash E604 when prompted, and this will take you to the UKRI virtual space where you can send us your questions and your comments, and you can send them anonymously if you wish. As your questions come in, they'll all be collated, and we'll endeavour to put them to the panel. We may not be able to answer all your questions today, but we'll do our best to answer as many as possible. The rest will all be answered and posted on the Information Hub in the days to come. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome our Chief Executive, Sir Mark Walport, to the stage.
Well, thank you very much indeed, Ian. I think the first task for UK research and innovation is to help the nation to run its trains on time. Now, that isn't actually entirely a joke. So this evening, quite fortuitously, having had the pleasure 2 days in a row of the line from London to Bristol being held up, and yesterday it was because all the signals defaulted to red and had to be switched back to green one at a time. This morning it was a broken down train, but this evening I will be going to a dinner with the Transport Minister and the Transport Research and Innovation Board and the Scientific Advisory Board for the Department for Transport. Now, I think everyone here will be aware that there have been certain problems with the retimetabling of rail services. And that actually is ultimately a modelling problem, and it's a piece of systems engineering. And I think it's a very interesting question whether, rather than doing the experiment live on the nation, it might have been better to have a digital model, a twin, of the railway network, on which you can actually try out an enormous systems engineering challenge of changing the timetable, because it may sound like an easy thing to do, but I suspect, and I'm speculating a bit, that the system that we were used to had been optimized over a period of time in a series of little steps, and just changing it in a very big way at once, basically, well, we saw what happened. And so our job is actually to work to tackle some of the major problems of society. And actually, this is an extremely interesting problem, modeling complex systems. And it comes to one of the major changes that we have in the world of research at the moment, which is that the tools that we have to do research are changing in the most extraordinary ways. And one of those, of course, is the power of data. And we talk about astronomical data sets, and that reflects the fact, actually, that it was the world of astronomy that first really had to deal with enormous sets of data because of the scale of the universe in which we live, the number of galaxies, the number of stars, just the number of everything is gigantic. And so when they were scanning the universe using telescopes, radio telescopes, astronomers had to deal with large data sets. But we all can do that now. There's no area of research, from the social sciences and longitudinal cohorts and administrative data through to our ability to sequence 500,000 genomes in the UK Biobank. These are all generating vast amounts of data. And the opportunity and the challenge of understanding those, of actually finding the needles in the enormous haystacks of data, means that we increasingly have to work as teams in multidisciplinary ways in order to tackle some of the big problems. So, as you saw in that video, we are, I think, an extremely important organization at an extremely important time. And so, I think every nation is thinking, what is our place in the world going forwards as we go through not only this revolution in science, but the revolution in business that we're going through at the moment. So we are truly going through another industrial revolution. And it is an industrial revolution where the fuel is not fossil fuel. In fact, what we have to do is move away from fossil fuel, because the first industrial revolution, which allowed us basically to urbanize, to provide a much safer environment, and has enabled the population around the world to grow, was a revolution which was based on the burning of fossil fuel and turning that into the power that we needed to run the railways, run the factories, heat our houses, etc. This industrial revolution is powered by data. And it does mean that there is an extraordinary change happening in almost all areas of work, where there's blurring between the service industries and manufacturing. And so an airline doesn't buy a jet engine anymore. What it does is it buys power by the hour. And looking to the future, will we buy a boiler for our dwellings? We might do, but we might equally buy a service which will deliver us a comfortable temperature of 18 degrees centigrade, for example. And so there are very big changes afoot. And it won't have escaped anyone's attention that we have now, at least I hope it hasn't escaped attention, we have an industrial strategy. And you can't have an industrial strategy which isn't based on the fuel that actually UK research and innovation is absolutely integral to developing, which is around research and innovation. It's about science, it's about engineering, it's about technology, it's about the social sciences, it's about the arts, the humanity. And one of the important things and the opportunities for the UK is that we are very good at humanizing engineering. We're good at humanizing technology. So you look around the world at some of the products, the ingenious products of the information technologists, they've been made usable by design. People like Sir Jonathan Ive, who designed the iPhones that many of us use, the iPads, etc. And so we are an important organization. We are truly important for the future of the United Kingdom. And It's much easier, I've said on many occasions, to start an organisation like UK Research and Innovation to bring together the 7 research councils, Innovate UK and Research England, in a context of having more money rather than less. Doing mergers when you have less money is a very difficult thing to do, although all rearrangements or reorganisations are difficult. So there's a great deal of public attention, and particularly political attention on us at the moment, because as I think everyone here knows, our budget is going up from just over £6 billion per year when we started to something over £8 billion a year by 2021. And that is the biggest uplift in research and innovation funding that there's been in the UK for certainly over 40 years. And coming back to transport for a second, one of the things that the industrial strategy set out was 4 big grand challenges. And those are clean growth, so switching away from that fossil fuel to more sustainable sources of energy and power in the future. Second, and very apposite, the future of mobility, the future of transport. Thirdly, healthy aging, and I'll say something about demographics in just a moment. And then fourthly, a challenge of a different order, which is a technological challenge, which is around artificial intelligence and data science broadly. Now, we are going to play an absolutely key role in each of those grand challenges. In almost everything we do, from the fundamental knowledge discovery, which is historically what the research councils have been world-leading organizations in supporting, through to their application for economic gain, but also social gain, for that social prosperity, for health, for the cultural goods of understanding about the past and simply the arts and the humanities more broadly. So that's a critical part of that. But I mean, obviously a critical part is actually turning new knowledge into societal benefit. Because of course, who funds UK research and innovation? It's everyone in this room and who's watching it. If they're taxpayers in the UK, I'm not sure there's an international stream here, but basically we are the funders of UK research and innovation as the taxpayers, and we have to deliver ultimately what it is that the taxpayers want. And they want knowledge, but they want knowledge to be applied. And just talking for a second about the demography, that's one of the things that's driving some of the sort of global challenges. And those global challenges require interdisciplinary approaches. And it's just worth remembering that the backdrop to the formation of UK research and innovation, it wasn't Brexit. Everyone tends to associate everything with Brexit. It wasn't that. It came before the referendum. It was Paul Nurse's work, commissioned by Greg Clark, who's now the Secretary of State at Bayes, when he was the Science Minister, was to look at what everyone acknowledges is a successful research and innovation funding system, but to see whether it can be made even better and more fit for purpose for the 21st century challenges we face. And of course, demographic challenge is one of the biggest challenges for the relationship between humans and the other species that we share the planet with. So a world in which there are now 7.5 billion people roughly on the planet, rising to perhaps 9 billion people by 2050, with all of the consequences in Europe, in the United States, in Japan, aging populations, a change in the dependency ratio where there are a smaller working population and a greater population of people who are economically less active, those certainly by no means inactive, and then other parts of the world where sub-Saharan Africa, India, parts of South America, where you have burgeoning and young populations, and then all of the pressures of migration that go with that, economic migration, the challenges of infectious disease in a densely populated world where we live cheek by jowl with the animals, the farm animals and other animals that we share our planet with. And of course the products of all of our waste, be it carbon waste in the form of carbon dioxide, the nitrogen oxides that we emit from our diesel-powered vehicles, the plastics that are being deposited everywhere around the planet. These are all fascinating, interesting, and important problems, and UKRI ultimately is all about understanding the world, the universe in which we live, but applying that knowledge to tackle some of society's problems. And so we need to be interdisciplinary, we need to recognize that big data permeates everything, and we are living in an extraordinary time of social change where we are in a world where there is populism, nationalism, a distrust of establishments, and the research community is definitely seen as part of the establishment, a distrust of authority. And so how we engage with publics, and there are lots of publics, is critically important to us. And of course that is one of the functions that we're taking on from BEIS as we form a UK Research Innovation. So we're still only a couple of months old, and in human lifespan we're just about learning to smile. But the reality, of course, is that everyone has been working on the formation of UK Research Innovation for over a year now. And so the 1st of April was very important, but somehow if you were sitting in my office it didn't feel that dramatically different on the 5th of April to the 5th of March, because we are on a continuous journey. We've achieved the transition, but we have to, over time, achieve the transformation, which will mean that we can do everything that we've said we're going to do, to work seamlessly across the organization, to be able to support interdisciplinary research, team research, to be able to catalyze, because that's our job. It's not simply doling out the money. It's actually understanding how, when the money is doled out, it's turned into outputs and outcomes, and it's helping the research and innovation community to do things that they might not even imagine they can do. It is about how we convene people, we bring together not just the usual suspects, but people from all sorts of different environments, we mix people up. And of course, we have to do it at a politically quite metastable time, but at a time when everyone around the world recognizes that research and innovation is an inherently global activity. So it's a pretty exciting time. We are a pretty exciting organization, and there is a very big vision here. We really do have to view ourselves as an organization that is key to the future of the UK, and the work is going to be important to all of us as citizens. So I'll just go back for a second to the review that Paul Nurse did, and he said the most effective research systems at producing knowledge for the public good are characterized by freedom of action and movement. They need to be permeable and fluid, allowing the ready transfer of ideas, skills, and people in all directions between the different sectors, research disciplines, and various parts of the research endeavor. And that is what we're going to do. And an important part of my job is getting out and seeing the research and the innovation that we support, talking to communities, and indeed that's an important role for all of us, which is actually engaging with our stakeholders. And it really isn't. We shouldn't be organizations which are postbox through which grants are received, they get processed, and money either comes out of the door, or of course more commonly doesn't come out of the door, because we can only fund a relatively small minority of the applications that we receive. So just yesterday, I was a little way towards London on the rail line at Harwell, at the launch of the Rosalind Franklin Institute. And that will be, because at the moment the building is yet to be built there, a fantastic new facility which will look at life in 4 dimensions. In other words, it will do structural studies of cells, organisms, and it will look in time. And it will do something which is extremely important, which is the great successes in science, in research in general, are when people devise new techniques, because they can then enable them to answer questions that weren't possible before. And so some of the things I saw yesterday were a developing electron microscope, which by using very rapid pulses will be able to look at chemistry in ways that wasn't possible before. It'll actually be able to see the structure of molecules as they interact with other molecules. I saw another camera being developed, and this is a camera that can look at cells and their interactions with microbubbles, which are potentially a way of delivering anti-cancer drugs. And so you coat these little bubbles with chemotherapeutic agents, and then they get disrupted at the site of the cancer cells. But we need to be able to see what's going on. And so they're working with a camera manufacturer and an extraordinary CMOS chip, which has a very wide spectral range, to develop a new camera. And that's what we have to do. We have to bring together the researchers who have questions with the technologists that have the techniques to develop the new kit. And it is all about, actually, physics, chemistry, working with biology. So, last week I was at the British Geological Survey, seeing underground, and thinking of seeing underground and seeing Mark Thompson sitting there. One of our extraordinary assets is that we work with a mine at Bowlby in the north of England. And there, it's a very deep mine, and it has no background radiation. And Mark has catalyzed working with our US counterparts on putting detectors down there that can detect. Now, is it neutrinos or antineutrinos? There's nodding. I'm not sure which it is. Maybe it's both. But we have extraordinary assets, and I think it's quite important that we sort of see those assets. And one of the things we're doing is taking out the board to do that. So I was at the Laboratory for Molecular Biology at the beginning of the year in Cambridge, and again looking at some of their cryo-electron microscopy, for which Richard Henderson won the Nobel Prize last year. So, and I've been to universities around the country. I've been to Oxford, I've been to Glasgow, I've been to Glasgow University, Glasgow Caledonia University, Belfast, University of Ulster. I'm really getting out and about, and I'm going to do this with business too, with industry, because these are all our stakeholders, and our job is to catalyse and use that taxpayer money wisely to support research and innovation. And so, research and innovation is at the heart of the industrial strategy, and it's not only the increase in funding towards an additional £2 billion per year, it's an additional £7 billion of funds between 2016 and 2021. But the government's also set out an ambition to increase its R&D expenditure to 2.4% of GDP by 2027. And the Prime Minister made a speech on science on the 21st of May, so quite recently, and she was absolutely clear on the integral role that science and innovation will play in bringing benefits to all, both in the UK and around the world. So we will use our funding to ensure that we all benefit from the knowledge, innovation, talent, and ideas generated from our funding. And we must actually tackle some of the particular problems of the UK: social, spatial, demographic, business disparities, and train times. And in order to do all this, we've got to be open to new and ambitious ways of working. We have a fantastic team of executive chairs in our corporate services, and we are going to work in new ways in order to be able to really deliver our best. And so we've got a number of tools which are actually helping us to work across the organisation. So we have the Industrial Strategy Challenge Fund, which is very much a partnership between Innovate UK and the different research councils, depending on what the domain area of the Industrial Strategy Challenge is. We've got the Strategic Priorities Fund, we've got the Global Challenges Research Fund, and we have a very significant amount of overseas development assistance money, over £1.5 billion. And that enables us to do international partnerships in a way that's proved enormously powerful. And to be absolutely clear, that's been going for several years now, so it's something that antedated UK research and innovation. But ultimately, we're about people. We're about our own people in UK research and innovation, and we're about supporting talented people around the UK and indeed around the world. And an extremely important aspect of that is diversity. It is equality, diversity, and inclusion. We must support all of the talents. And Jennifer Rubin, who will be talking to us in a few minutes' time, is taking the lead on that. And of course, ultimately, we've got to take risks to support those who are prepared to tackle tough problems. But talented people can only work if we provide them with the best environment. So we will work to provide the right environment and incentives for universities, for institutes, for innovators, and for businesses to flourish. And as I've said, at a time when the importance and value of truth and expertise is being questioned by people around the world, our job is to maintain and strengthen integrity and trust in research and innovation by working to establish the best culture and the highest standards of practice. And as Honora Neal has said on many occasions, the corollary of trust is trustworthiness. And we have to demonstrate through our actions and integrity that we are trustworthy. But it's never really been more important, I think, to engage the public in discussions about research and innovation when we all know that there is enormous power from technologies such as artificial intelligence. But to many people, they feel that it feels like something that's going to eat their job. And so we have to think very carefully about how we maximize the benefits and educate people, continue to develop them throughout their life, because jobs will change, there's no question about it. So I'm very proud of the team that we've brought together. We have, as I've said, got an exceptional cohort of executive chairs of our 9 councils. We've got an outstanding board led by Sir John Kingman, and we've got extraordinary people working in our councils, and a very dedicated staff who spent the last year putting our organisation together. Of course, last month, at the beginning of, well, actually, it was at the beginning, yes, no, last month, it was in May, we launched our strategic prospectus, and that was a significant milestone for the UK research and innovation. And we had an excellent event at the British Library, which was very well attended. And I'm very pleased to have the opportunity to speak to so many of you today. And of course, one challenging part of being such a large organisation is that we are spread across the country and indeed over the world. And therefore, I hope this technology of streaming is working, and who knows, there may be, I hope there are lots of people at the end of it, but we'll see how many questions you come up with. But I'm also very grateful to Meraki and the team who've put a lot of effort into organising today. And I'm very excited about the challenges and opportunities that lie ahead for us, and look forward to working very closely with all of you to make sure that UKRI is a resounding success. And I said half jokingly at the end of my remarks at the Rosalind Franklin Institute inauguration yesterday that you'd better succeed. And the challenge for us is we had better succeed, because there is an enormous amount of expectation that's been put ahead of us, and it really isn't business as usual going forward. I think we've all got to rise to the exceptional challenge and the extraordinary opportunity. We really are an important organisation, and we must be a wonderful organisation to work in. Thank you for your attention.